Hello, everybody. Welcome to VanLife and Chill. My name is Forrest Stevens. I'm your host, and today I'm talking to Frankie and Alex from F&A VanLife on YouTube and social media. And they live in a 2019 Ram Promaster, and they left some pretty well-paying jobs to travel and follow their dreams and to do a lot of snowboarding. So I don't want to tell you guys too much about this podcast because I don't want to ruin it for you. So let's just jump into it, get into it, and I hope you all enjoy.
So we're Frankie and Alex. I'm Alex. He's Frankie.
Yep, we're F&A Van Life together on all social media platforms.
And we've been living van life for the last 2 years. We started in a 2003 Dodge Sprinter and upgraded just this past November to a 2019 Ram Promaster.
So yeah, I mean, right there, I'm curious to hear a little bit about what the difference is, in your opinion, between the Sprinter and the Promaster, and why you decided to go from the Sprinter to the Promaster.
We started off in the Sprinter because it was a much cheaper way of going about getting into the lifestyle for us. We weren't really sure if we wanted to live this lifestyle. We know that we were going to do it for at least a year of travel. So we found a 2003 with 211,000 miles on it. It was a Dodge Sprinter, 2,500 extended, so it was the big boy.
But it was also an old rusty boy.
Yeah, for sure. I had to do everything underneath the hood except for replace the engine or transmission. So we were able to find the rig for $4,000 and then build it out for probably about another 8 to 10 grand, somewhere about there. So we were probably about 15K deep into that van, which we loved. It was a great van, but I just got to a point where I was pushing a wrench way too much and I wanted to enjoy travel more. So we sold that van and upgraded to the 2019 Ram Promaster. There are definitely subtle differences. The Ram is definitely wider.
Yeah.
It gives us more living space overall. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that the Sprinter was very narrow, and we tried to maximize the living space by not having too many overhead cabinets, or, just like trying to keep it feeling open. But the Promaster, the benefit of it is that it's definitely much wider. Like, we have a full kitchen on one side, a full cabinet on the other side as well, and we still have enough room in the middle to like roll out a yoga mat. We can walk past each other easily, and we can, work out inside no problem. And just feel more spacious.
And why did you guys decide to get into van life to begin with?
So I think the idea was more mine at first. I was working in New York City, doing the normal 9 to 5. I was in air conditioning tech, and I would travel like 13 miles a day, and just to commute to work and then to come back home. So it was a total of 26 miles. But that would take me on average about 3 hours a day. And it would literally take 3 hours of my life away every single day. So for me, just having the same exact commute to come back home almost every single day it became boring. I was on autopilot every day. I needed a change. I wanted to snowboard as many mountains as I could in my lifetime. And so for me, it was about winter travel at first. And yeah, I was watching a bunch of different people that are snowboarders, professional snowboarders, that had these build outs or RVs that they were traveling in. And it was just something that intrigued me. And I was actually going to get like a pickup truck and tow like a mini mate behind it. And then I met Alex. And on our first date, I actually wound up telling her that I was going to travel. So I invited her along kind of jokingly, but at the same time, I was like, don't get attached because I don't know if I'm going to be here much longer.
Yeah. And then I kind of brought his idea maybe a little bit more to the ground. Frankie is much more of the dreamer, and I'm much more of the planner organizer. At the time, I was working in New York City as well, at a finance company as an executive assistant. And I'd kind of climbed the corporate ladder as far as it could go. In my role, I was working for the top guy in the New York office. I had so much freedom, and I was, in charge of a bunch of other people, which meant I could delegate and nobody could tell me what to do. It was very nice. But yeah, I kind of looked around and I was like, well, you know, I did what everybody said I should do. I got, you know, I graduated school, I got a good job, I, you know, worked what I was supposed to do. I, you know, got promoted and climbed the corporate ladder. And then I looked around and I was like, well, gosh, I mean, is that it? You know, I'm still feeling not super fulfilled. I'm looking at the people who are like 10 plus years ahead of me and they're counting down to when they can retire, or, oh, like this year I get 1 extra day of vacation because I've, you know, it's my 20-year anniversary. And I was like, gosh, is that all that I have to look forward to? So I was kind of ready to get out of New York City. You know, my job was quite stressful, actually. I was, you know, managing this guy's life and this whole thing. And it, you know, I was having daily panic attacks on the way to work. And I was pretty done with New York City and just like the hustle mentality. And then when Frankie and I met and he said that he was going to be traveling, it kind of just sparked something in my mind that was like, wow, that's something that I would love to do. It had been on my bucket list for a while to do like this RV travel kind of like nomad life thing. And my previous partner, kind of just like shot that idea down. Like I went to him with my bucket list and was like, here's all the things that I want to accomplish in my life. And he was just like, no, never going to happen. No. Which was quite disheartening, to be honest. And so I meet Frankie and he's like ready to travel, ready to go. And it just kind of like sparked something in me that like, you know, this could be an amazing opportunity to, you know, obviously him and I got along. If we didn't, this whole thing would be mute. Yeah. And I, you know, maybe would be traveling by myself or something, or still in New York, who knows. But
and I don't think that was like the only thing. I actually kind of postponed my travels to get to know Alex more myself. Because realistically, I wasn't looking for a partner at that point in time. I was just kind of looking to like go out on dates and just get to know more people. I was just getting back into the dating scene myself, from having like a really bad injury. So, but Alex was my first date after getting back into that scene. And we just hit it off. Our date was only supposed to be like an hour or two. It turned into like an 8-hour date, doing all the things in New York, walking over the Brooklyn Bridge, going to the barcade, having a couple drinks at different places, listening to live music, and full-on high school-style make-out in the park at the end, you know? So it was like we really, really enjoyed each other's company, and then that turned into just, you know, continuing to grow on that. And yeah, being in New York, even though we were both in Brooklyn, it was like almost an hour just to get to each other, you know? So it just goes to show how like busy New York City is. And if that was me driving, if Alex wanted to take the train, it would take her almost 2 hours to get to me.
And God forbid I took the bus once or twice and it was like a 4-hour bus ride. And I was like, oh my God, it was the worst thing ever. So anyways, Frank kind of sparked this idea of travel, and then he conveniently postponed his trip a little bit longer, so that he could, you know, save up more money. Which really, I think he just wanted to spend some more time with me and get me on board with the plan.
That's true. And the amazing thing is, like, after I did postpone leaving, pretty much right after that, Alex asked me a bunch of questions about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And then, like, a few weeks later, she just pulls out this whole Excel spreadsheet of, like, all the stuff that I need to do, how much money I need to save to do this lifestyle how I wanted to do it.
Which was with a brand new truck and a brand new mini mate.
Yeah, it was so, like, not the right idea.
I think it would have put him like $60K in the hole before he even like left New York.
Yeah, it was basically, I had to save like $4,000 a month, you know, on top of paying all my expenses to be able to lead into this lifestyle. And which, you know, I had a good enough job to be able to do, but I would have had to literally work every hour of overtime possible for that next year, you know. And when I saw this budget list that Alex pulled out, I was like amazed by somebody who was so willing to put themselves out there for me and, like, you know, put me almost first for me to accomplish my goal. And then I said, there's something missing here. And she was like, what? And I'm like, you're not on there. And she, sure enough, flips the page over and she has a whole expense sheet for herself on how she needs to save for it. I think she was just waiting for me to make sure that, you know, to tell her, like, I want you to be there with me.
I didn't want to invite myself.
It sounds like, and this is the case for a lot of people that choose van life, but van life often is this idea and this sort of solution to a lot of problems that people might have. And it sounds like, Alex, you know, this is my interpretation, but it sounds like you had some problems with your work-life balance and you needed to sort of get away a little bit. And maybe you guys can just elaborate on that. Like, was that what you were looking for? Was some sort of solution to be able to be together as well, you know, not be an hour apart, get away from the expenses of the city? What were some of the problems that you were trying to solve with van life?
I think yes to all of the above.
Yeah.
You know, we were both living pretty fast-paced lives. We'd both been in the same careers for almost a decade. We were ready to kind of switch things up and, you know, looking to the future. It's like, okay, well, if I ever want to buy a house, I'm not going to be able to afford to buy one in New York City. You know, like, that's just very economically out of the question, even though we were both making very good money. So it was kind of like we were both ready to slow down a little bit in terms of like getting to more rural places. Like a lot of our dates would be to go hiking or to like get out in nature and, you know, take bike rides, you know. And so we were ready to leave the city. And like Frank said, we were really only planning to travel for a year. So for us, it was kind of like an easy way to ease into it in terms of like, you know, we're just going to travel for a year and then we'll have seen everything there is to see and then we'll find where we want to live.
Yeah, and I think kind of what happened too, even like to go back to the live-work balance, I think you kind of hit it on the head there when you said that, is we were working more than we were living, you know, and life is for us to live. It's not for us to work all the time, you know, and I think that's something that as like Americans, we've kind of been, you know, pushed into, you know, the 5-day work week and work the overtime, make as much money as you can. You know, when you do that, how are you even spending that money? You know, like, are you even enjoying it? You know, you got to ask yourself a lot of those questions. And to live a more simple life, make a little bit less money. I mean, we work a lot now because we do social media content creation. We're on a bunch of different platforms. But it's work on our time and we're working for ourselves. We're making our own money. We're not relying on a company to tell us we have to be in a spot to, you know, make money, which in turn allows us to be able to be anywhere, you know, at any time. The hardest thing for us would just be making sure that we have service for some of it, you know, but we could, if we have all of our stuff done, we could legitimately go off the grid for 2 weeks, you know, and not have to worry about having service. We could go on vacation for as long as we want. You know, it's incredible the difference, the amount of value that you gain in what's the most valuable thing, and that's time, right? When you work for somebody else, you lose that time. That's why they're paying you. They're paying you for that time specifically. So what is that time cost? You know, what is the value of that to you?
But I will say, in terms of like getting into van life to escape our problems, you know, your problems follow you wherever you're going. Like, just because you moved into a van, you know, like we then now had new problems. Like, oh, well, we only saved $1,000 each for each month of travel. But because we were doing this 71 mountain, you know, feet, like Frank was trying to set a world record in most mountains visited in a single season. And we spent like $900 on gas one month because we were just go, go, go. Like, we were trying to get to the next mountain. And it was like, well, if we spend $900 on gas, now we only have, you know, $1,200 for the rest of the, like, for food, for cell phone, for like everything else. So now you're like budgeting problems. And like, it took me a while actually to like detox from New York City. Like, just like my adrenaline had been so fired up for so long that, like, you know, the first couple of months that we were traveling, I was still having some panic attacks. I was still, you know, feeling that anxiety. Frank likes to talk about the first night that we were in the van.
I think the first night was the funniest night because it's like Alex has all these like anxious like things from coming from New York, you know, from living there for so long. And we pulled up. We didn't have like the iOverlander app. We didn't have any of these apps that help us find a place to sleep. And we pulled up into a hotel parking lot because we're like, they're not going to like bother us, you know? So we parked in the back. We put up the covers real quick. And Alex was like, I was going to watch a Netflix movie and she's like, shut off your phone. Stop doing everything. Like, shh. I'm like trying to talk to her. She's like, whisper. And I'm like, all right, calm down, you know, but obviously I'm trying to make her feel as comfortable as possible. So I'm doing all these things. And that was something that kind of stayed with at least Alex. For me, it was definitely still nerve-wracking for like the first 2 weeks to the first month. But when we started hitting these mountains, we were able to stay in the mountain parking lots on the East Coast at least. So it made it really easy for us to travel and also allowed us to get more comfortable pretty quick with the process. Not knowing later on we would have to deal with the parking spot thing a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a lot of challenges, of course, that, you know, you addressed that really well, how you said that, you know, your problems follow you. And then also there's all these new challenges as well. Like, and maybe you can speak on that, being a couple in this small space. You know, how long had you known each other before you're living in this really small space? That can be a challenge for any couple. Maybe you can just talk to us about like what that is like, or what some of the things that you've learned about each other and about yourself from living together in such a small space.
The first thing that I want to say is that if you have a partner and you say about that partner, if I lived in that space, that small of a space with them, I would kill them. It's probably not the right partner for you. I'm going to just start there. We lived together previous to moving into the van.
Well, so
6 months prior.
Yeah, so we dated for about a year, and then we lived together for about 6 months in a pretty small New York apartment, and then we moved into the van from that.
I would say it was about like 2.5 van sizes. We're talking van size, so because that's part of the lifestyle. But yeah, so the apartment we were in wasn't much bigger. The one thing that we have going for us is that we're very open with each other. We're very good at communicating with one another. If there's any issues, we always talk about what those things are. It became a lot more relevant in living in a van, being together 24/7. So you got to just get even better at that. There are certain small challenges, like, you know, women deal with certain aspects of life that men don't, you know, so how comfortable is your partner, you know, with doing that stuff in front of you, and how comfortable are you with them, you know? So you learn a lot more about each other, and which in turn, I believe it makes you care more about them. It makes you understand more about them. So I believe that it is challenging, but at the same time, it opens your eyes to, you know, what life really is for each other.
Well, and two, like, we know a lot of couples that, you know, we met as van life couples, and then, you know, as we were hanging out with them, we were like, oh, this isn't going to work out for them. And then maybe like 6 months later, you hear that they broke up or whatever, because it is challenging on a relationship, you know, making all of these decisions. Where are we going? Where are we driving? Where are we parking? How, like, what's our water level at? Like, if you can't communicate through all the little things that you need to do every single day to keep the van running, to keep life moving smoothly, it's going to be really hard. And, you know, some couples, everything turns into a fight, right? And with van life, sometimes there's just problems that you need to solve now. It doesn't matter who was right. It doesn't matter my idea versus your idea. It's like, we're stuck, or this is broken, or, you know, what are we going to do next? And it's like, we just need to decide, and we need to move on, you know? And then whatever the decision is, like, we'll live with it and we'll figure it out. But like, there's no room really for like ego, you know, there's no like, you're wrong. It's like, we're a team.
You have to be very flexible too in that.
Yes, absolutely. And be able to be like, okay, let's try your idea.
And let's
see, you know?
Yeah, and I will say that normally most of the time when you're having issues with your partner, it actually is stemming from yourself. So like sometimes you have to dig a little deeper in yourself and like, why am I getting upset about this?
Do I need some alone time? Do I need to go to the gym? Do I need a shower? Do I just need to like watch a sappy movie and cry for the next 2 hours. Like, it's, you know, people can get snappy for a lot of reasons. And like, if you're hungry, just like stop and eat some food because that'll solve lots of problems.
Most of the time, that's it. Most of the time, I'm hangry, and you know, it stems from that.
That's funny. Quick little interruption from today's podcast. If you live in a van or have a van and want to get yourself featured on different media, there is an email address in the description of this podcast, and you can reach out to me there. We have filmmakers all across the world, as well as we do this podcast, which might be a good suit for you. If you want to get a van tour on different media, please contact us. I want to talk to you. I want to meet you. I want to film with you. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much. So, you know, I'm very curious to know a little bit more about you two and where you came from and like sort of your upbringing, because I feel like choosing to live in a van is a very, I mean, it's becoming more and more normal, but it's kind of a strange lifestyle choice to make. And it's not everybody chooses it. Not everybody can do it. So I'm curious to know about like who you are and how that led you to be able to live this way.
Yeah, Alex and I are definitely cut from two different cloths, which is kind of incredible that we are here in this situation together, because you would think that, you know, you have to kind of be a similar person, you know, or from a similar background. That's not true at all. I mean, I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally. I grew up in Brooklyn, kind of like a, you know, movie kind of lifestyle, all the kids playing in front of the house all the time, manhunt basketball, you know, 50 to 100 kids every night in front of the house, kind of just crazy lifestyle, city boy through and through. I actually had a friend the other day say to me, you know, like, out of all the people, I would have never pictured the Brooklyn boy to be the one living this lifestyle, right? And so for me, up until I was about 12 years old, I lived in New York. I grew up fairly poor. My family lost a house that they had. There was some addiction issues, and my whole family got split apart. Me and my mom lived together. My sister and my aunt lived at my aunt's house. My brother lived at my other grandmother's house. And then 2 years later, my dad came back and told us that we were going to be living together, but we're moving to Florida, which I was really excited about anyway. And yeah, so moved to Florida, which was completely west coast of Florida at that, which is completely different than New York. I mean, I was lucky to have a couple kids outside the house. I had to really reach out and meet them all and try to bring everybody together, because kids would just kind of sit in the house out in that area where I was from. Luckily, you know, it became, you know, a thing where everybody would kind of gather up and hang out and have a good time. And I got the taste of like a slower lifestyle too. So I understood the busy life. I understood the slower life. And then it kind of molded me as a person to like be able to adjust to all different types of things. One thing I knew about myself is that I loved being like outside, outdoors, out in nature, doing some type of activity. And so when I moved back to New York to take the job in New York City doing air conditioning for a living, that's when I learned how to snowboard as well, because I wanted to learn a winter sport. And that's where my passion came from, to want to travel and visit all these different mountains. So yeah, I think that just overall my life and my background allowed me to be comfortable with trying to learn and meet all different types of people and be open to every type of situation. And yeah, just wanting to explore the outdoors is what kind of got me interested in this lifestyle.
And then I grew up in a suburb outside of Toronto called Pickering. It's kind of like a typical Canadian suburban town. Very middle class, but my dad had a job that had a lot of travel involved with it. So we would often kind of tag along on his business trips. So we got to see, you know, a bunch of different U.S. states. You know, we would go on some like all-inclusive family vacations to the Caribbean and stuff. But we probably only went on maybe like 1 or 2 camping trips ever. And I don't really have like super fond memories of, you know, anything like that. But I think I just, you know, I never really bought into the idea that you had to work 40 hours a week for your whole life to like have a life. Both my parents worked corporate jobs. So like as I was growing up, I was very much a latchkey kid. that like I would come home and my sister, who is a couple of years older than me, she would be my babysitter, and we would, make ourselves snacks and, watch daytime TV like after school. So we kind of like took care of ourselves, and then, my parents would get home around like 6 or 7 o'clock, rush to get dinner on the table, and then like get us to our like dance lessons or, whatever. And so I just watched them like commute to work every day, be gone for all these hours, like only have the weekends to themselves. And I just always had this idea in my mind that like this cannot be like all that there is in life. And I remember having like an argument with my mom once about like how ridiculous it was that like we're supposed to work for, 40 plus years of our lives so that we can then enjoy a future that we may or may not be privileged to even get to. Like there's no guarantee that you're even going to live to your retirement.
Yeah.
So, I always had this kind of like entrepreneurial idea. Like I was working in the corporate world, but I would always have some kind of side hustle going on. So when we were talking about moving into the van, it was definitely a little bit scary to, say goodbye to like the structure of corporate life, because you have like the benefits and the steady paycheck and the vacation days. And
I will say one of the things that we did do is we were like, what type of jobs can we do on the road? And Alex and I sat down and were like, wrote a list of all the different things that would be possible for us to feel like we could get a job doing. And there was a lot of jobs that we felt comfortable doing. We were like, there's nothing above us. Like just because I did air conditioning and made, almost $100,000 a year base pay, that doesn't mean I can't go back to serving tables. That doesn't mean I, won't take out the trash for somebody. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't mean like there's no job that is too big or too little that we couldn't do.
And that list was actually really reassuring, like as we were leaving our jobs. Because one of the things that, in all these Facebook groups and stuff, like it's one of the most common questions is like, how do you make money on the road? Like, how do we do this? And so writing out that list of all these different ways, it's like, oh, like it just kind of expands your mind. And you're like, there's a million ways that I could make money, whether it's online or in person or, seasonal work, whatever.
We just recently proved this too, because we were in Idaho and Boise, and just to prove that you could get a job like off of Craigslist, I went and got a job off of Craigslist, and it was as a digger, and I dug a hole for like 4 hours, and it paid me like $70. So it was like almost $20 an hour to dig a freaking hole. I mean, yeah, it's not the best type of work, but
it would have paid for dinner or a tank of gas.
Yep.
Yep. So it was just kind of reassuring to know that like, if our savings ran out and like whatever, like we'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need that sense of security with a lifestyle that's kind of nomadic, right? Because you don't have your feet on the ground all the time. Your wheels are spinning. So it's nice. Yeah, that's a smart idea to make that list and to feel like, okay, I have some fallback options or some ideas of things that I can easily do. So I'm curious to know a little bit about your current van build and maybe just some of the specific components you guys used. What's your battery size like? What do you think are some necessities, or what are some of the things that you've chosen to bring with you and build your van out with?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of necessities for us, since we do like 4 seasons van life, we do all the different seasons, but winter being the most prevalent one, we had to have a heater. We had to have really good insulation in the walls. We definitely want to have a shower and toilet in the van, just being the fact that, the pandemic did happen and it shut down all the gyms. So the shower situation completely changed. So we wanted to have all those, definitely a hot water shower at that too. So we made that all possible in this van. Our battery bank size is 300 amp hours. We are digital nomads, so we do need a decent amount of battery to be able to plug into our wall outlets and chop up, our video clips and everything else that we do. We have a DC to DC charger that allows us to charge as we drive. And since we do a significant amount of driving, we are always charging our battery bank. So we barely need our solar. but we got enough solar on the roof. It's almost 400 watts, which would trickle charge our batteries in the summertime. So then we don't have to do as much driving in the summer. Yeah, so I think there was a lot of little things that we thought about in that sense.
Well, and also from our first build to our second build, like when we were building our first van, the only, touchstone of van life that we had was what we saw on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
We did not know anybody who had a van. We'd never seen the inside of a van.
Yep.
So literally we were just basing, we were trying to make educated guesses about like how we live and things like that. But you really have no idea until you actually live in a van what you need out of a van, which is why we kind of recommend that people don't get so crazy in their first van build and like drop $100,000 into it. Cause then you're on the road for 3 months and you're like, well, I never used that. And then, this isn't important, or this should have been like that. So I'm kind of glad that our first van was, a fixer upper. It was almost like a trial run. We didn't plan it that way. We, like I said, we were only going to travel for a year. And so it didn't really matter what the van was like. But after living in it for so many months, we were like, these are the things we absolutely need. These are the things that work really well. These are the things that we would change. So, that's what we did in building, this 2.0 version of our first van. And already we're like thinking and turning about like, okay, for our third build, what would we do differently and what would be important to us?
Even something so simple as like everybody puts those puck lights in the vans. You are so close to the ceiling that the puck lights are so direct into your eyes that it almost hurts. Even on a dimmer switch, it's a lot of light. So we actually recessed our lighting in these wood planks that run along the ceiling, and you can actually see them right here above our head. And our lighting is underneath that, so it's not direct into our eyes, which then in turn allows us to have a much more pleasant space throughout the day and or an evening. And we could even change the color to a more moody feeling for a nighttime, to get ready for bed, to tone down and relax.
Have you guys ever gotten the knock before?
We did for the first time recently in Idaho and in Boise, but we were in the wrong spot. We deserved to get the knock where we were.
Well, it was just kind of silly. Like, we were at a park and we took Paco for a walk. And then
it's winter at this point, so
right.
The sun sets a lot quicker. We were cooking dinner.
Yeah, so we got back to the van. We're cooking dinner. We had no intentions of sleeping there, but like we were hungry and we just went for a big walk. And we're like, okay, so we'll just make dinner and eat and then we'll leave. But I guess the rule for this park in Idaho, we got to plug this in.
I got it.
Is that, sorry. So the rule for this park in Idaho is that you have to leave the park 30 minutes before sunset.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. We didn't know. So, by the time the cop knocked on our door, it was definitely dark out. Like maybe it was like 8 p.m. or something. And he like, boom, 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 like bangs on the door. And Frank's like, that's a police officer. And I'm like, what? Like, how do you know that? And then he opens the door and it's a cop, and he was quite nice. I mean, like, Frank opened the side door up and like clearly the guy can see that like this is a house and we're cooking dinner and like I've got 2 frying pans going and like chopping. And so like, I think that reassured him that we weren't like up to no good kind of thing.
And I opened the door big and wide so he could see in and, let him see like what type of living space we're in, because then he'll very much see like, oh, okay, these people aren't really going to be trouble.
They're not like a danger to society,
and if you want to see more about it, you can actually see it on our YouTube channel. On the thumbnail it says "We got the knock" in big letters. It actually was it's funny, these moments that are like kind of scary or something bad feels like it happens are the videos that always do extremely well. So even when something bad happens, you normally get reimbursed a little bit. You know what I mean?
It works out.
It's okay when it happens. You go with it. Be as nice as you possibly could be, because they'll be nice back if you're being nice to them.
But we also know a couple people who like we've been on the road 2 years. That's the first time ever that we got knocked on, right? We do our best to park in places that are legal to park, forestry land, BLM, even in cities and stuff. Like, we'll make sure that the streets that we're parking on don't have like ordinances or whatever. But like we know some other people who are like, oh, we've been on the road like 6 months and we got the knock like 5 times.
But
we're like, what are you doing?
But
like you're doing this wrong.
It's legitimately because people will even be like, hey, can you move your vehicle? And they'll be like no. And then of course you're gonna get the cops called on you. You're just looking for that.
And maybe they're just trying to grow their YouTube channel or something, and it's like, ooh, if we get knocked on so many times, like our channel will blow up.
Which is unfortunate too, because it hurts the image of the people out here living this lifestyle. It really, unfortunately, it does, because if you're being an idiot out here, people are gonna treat you like an idiot. You know, you're going to get the cops.
And then the next person that drives through is going to get treated like an idiot because they remember that last van lifer who was an idiot.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, you know, in terms of keeping campsites clean and stuff like that. Like if we, like this morning we got to a campsite late last night, forestry land. We woke up this morning and looked around and we were like, ew, there's garbage all over.
There was literally poop on the ground with
like
wet wipes stuck in it, like iced into it. And it's just like we clean up as much as we can. I even tried cleaning that up, but it was so frozen I couldn't clean that up. You know, it's sad because, you know, we want these places to stay open. You want the ability to be able to stop and park at a Walmart or Cracker Barrel on the way to the next beautiful destination, you know, and all these people that are doing these things could ruin it for the rest that are trying to do the right thing.
What are your personal beliefs that sort of bring you up when you're feeling low in life?
For me, it's just think positive. There's always a lesson in everything, whether it's negative or positive. Like there's a lesson to be learned, and if you could find what that is and learn what that lesson is trying to teach you, you could always pull out a positive thing from it. I mean, if there's a breakdown that happens, it might be because you need to be in a specific place to meet a specific person. You know, I mean, for instance, we had a breakdown in the Olympic National area, which led us to meet Uncle Kevin, you know, the guy that we just met on the road at a random grocery parking lot. I gave him some stickers, and, you know, next thing you know, a few months later, the guy's driving us across the country because we sold our van and we're living in this van with him, you know, for 3 weeks. I mean, we extended an extra week because we had such a good time with the guy, you know, and then now we're about to go to Hawaii, and he's going to, you know, live in our van while we're in Hawaii and watch Paco for us, which is our dog. So it's like, you know, these things happen, and there's always like, it's putting you in the right spot, or there's a lesson to be learned, and you should always try to like figure out what those little things are, in my opinion.
I think the other thing is that we're always trying to be in the flow of life and like trusting that the universe has your back. You know, not to say that when those shitty things happen or the breakdown happens or whatever, that we don't get flustered, that we're not annoyed,
Yep.
You know, but we always try to get out of that mindset as quickly as possible, even if it's through like gritted teeth, like everything is fine. We're fine. Everything's great. It's going to be fine.
And like that happens fairly often, and also it's happened recently, so you know
but then it's true though, you know, the quicker that you can get out of that like everything sucks mindset and like, oh, this is broken and no, this is broken, you know, it's like you wake up in the morning and you stub your toe and then you decide it's going to be a horrible day. It's going to be a horrible day.
Yep.
If you wake up in the morning and you stub your toe and you're like, that was stupid, okay, let's make a nice cup of tea, you know, like the day is going to unfold differently. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, just recently we had our heater breakdown. We had like the worst night ever. It was freezing cold. We're at elevation. We're like, we're going to die if we stay here. Like, we're going to freeze to death.
And the interesting part about that is as we're looking for the stuff that we need and a secondary heater as like another source of heat, just in case it breaks down again, we stumble across a person stumbles across us in O'Reilly's parking lot when I'm taking the thing apart to clean it. And he offers us his garage space. He's
like, come drive over to my house. You can work on my garage. I have all the tools. I have an indoor space. Like, and like, you know, you don't wake up thinking, oh, somebody's going to like save our butts today. But it was below freezing, and Frank's literally under the car in a parking lot trying to pull our heater apart, and this guy just swoops in and is like, let me help.
And it's funny because he even said to me, like, I debated on even, you know, extending the invitation. Something in me was just like, offer it, you know? So sure
And then
enough,
like we became friendly. We like hung out with him and his sister. We took them out for dinner. You know, like if we're ever through Bozeman again, we'll definitely reach out. You know, it's like you make new friends in the strangest places.
and he's like an avid skier and is part of the Montana Bandits, which is like a ski crew that rides together and films stuff. So I was like, if you have any questions about, you know, film or anything, you know, let me know. I'm more than happy to help. And, you know, we all try to help each other is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's so amazing. I mean, yeah, the kindness of humans is just amazing. There's so many good people out there, and that's a beautiful part about van life and just traveling in general. I think is the people you meet, and the community that's forming around van life too is like other van dwellers too. You know, there's so many unique and interesting and cool people in there. So it's cool to hear those stories. It's very encouraging, and it's yeah, I think it'll be helpful for people just to change perspective, because a lot of it is just the way you look at the world. You know, it sounds like you guys have a positive outlook on life in general, and that will attract that positive people.
Yeah, we like exited from the news cycle when we left New York. Like we don't really like keep up on things, which, you know, like ignorance is bliss sometimes, but also we've been proven time and time again that, like, you know, your perception of somebody is just your own bias, you know? Like we had this guy roll up on us in Alaska who, like, I mean, if I'm going to stereotype, like he kind of looked like a hillbilly. He had like all these political stickers all over his wagon.
Grandpa Jim.
He like he's wearing the overalls. He rolls up and he's like, "What are you guys doing here?" And like immediately, you know, the other people we were with kind of got their guards up and was like, "Oh my God, who is this guy?" And Frank's like, "What's up? Like, this is who we are." And he ended up being so sweet. He gave us a tour of his house. He was like, "Look at all the cool things. Like, here's all." It was crazy. We weighed ourselves on his meat hook. It was great.
He had 3 outhouses. Yeah, we did. He had 3 outhouses on the back of his where he lived, and they were all immaculate, right? And
like nicer than our house.
Yeah, yeah. And when you sat like to use the bathroom, right? There was a glass window on it, and you look out and you have a view of the Matanuska Glacier, the river, and the huge mountains in the background. And it was just like this phenomenal view. He goes, this spot, if you poop here, will be the best spot you ever poop in your life.
He's like, princesses have pooped here.
Yeah.
We're like, okay. But like, you know, just assuming things about people. Like if we were like, oh, this guy's fucking horrible, and we just like didn't want to talk to him, we wouldn't have had a wonderful experience.
Well, if we just thought that he was the typical media Republican that like they put out there, you know, or Trump supporter, you know what I mean? We would have never got that experience. We would have never met such an awesome person. And then I also, you know, offered my help on building the bridge that they were rebuilding, you know, and which helping locals, it's, you know, you're helping your neighbor. And, you know, we're not their neighbor right now, but in that moment we were, because we were parked up right next to their homes. And, you know, they were just super kind to us after that, offering cookies and sandwiches and, you know, whatnot. So, yeah, it's all about the way you look at it and the way that you go about it. So even if somebody comes at you hard, if you come back at them kind of soft, like in a nice manner.
We had a guy bang on our door. We were parked in the middle of nowhere in Washington. Well, actually, so he comes up to the back of the door. In our last van, we had windows. It was my birthday. I was watching my favorite show on TV. And he comes and he takes a picture of our license plate. And I'm like, "Excuse me, like, hello?" And he's like, "F you." He gives us the finger. He's like, "Gah." So Frank goes out. He's only wearing his underwear. He's like, "Hey man, like, what's up?"
I'm like, "Excuse me, is everything okay?" And he's like, "No, you people come around here and you throw your trash everywhere and you bring the virus with you." And I was like, "Listen, dude, you know, first off, you should ask people who they are, where they're from, what's going on in their life.
Like, yeah, we have
That way-
out-of-state plates, but we've been in Washington for the last 2 months.
That way you could paint your own picture instead of just listening to what the news is saying, right? And I said, you know, we've been traveling for the last 5 months, and in the last 2 months, we've been around nobody. Because of everything that's going on, we don't know what's happening.
That's why we're in the middle of nowhere,
we're in the middle of
in
nowhere.
the woods.
And I said, we are the ones who actually come around and clean up these areas because we don't want them dirty. We want them to be pristine and beautiful when we arrive and or when other nomads arrive, right? And so by the time we were done having a conversation, he's like, well, God bless you guys. I'm so sorry. You know, I shouldn't be watching the media, but it gets me all fired up. And I'm like, well, that's what it's meant to do. You know, it's meant to fire you up. It's meant to make you feel these ways, to divide you from others, to give you a bias, right? So if you could just ask people these simple questions, you'll have a much better, you know, outlook on who they might be, you know? And if I was to come at him in a very negative way, and
like if he was like F you and we were like, no, F you, you know,
it would have been a much different situation.
It would have been bad,
you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, this is a kind of something that a lot of people talk about, but maybe you guys, I would love to hear your guys' opinions on just the reality of van life versus the hashtag van life, the Instagram van life. Maybe you guys can just tell me your thoughts on how those two things are maybe different, or how they overlap, or just your general thoughts on it.
I think that's a wonderful question.
I think a lot, no matter what on social media, you are getting a snippet of someone else's life. Yep. You are getting a moment. You are getting a picture. You are getting a 10-minute video. That's not the entirety of anybody's experience in any lifestyle. And a lot of people on social media only put up the good things. You know, it's like the most beautiful view, the best picture, the best, you know, day ever.
Well, and the reason why that happens is because the platform itself promotes that. So, like, in order to get more likes or, you know, more views on something, you put up the pretty stuff, right? And people want their life to look kind of perfect. You know, we're all human. Nobody's perfect. You know, so the idea is, in my opinion, is that there's a mixture of both. There's a mixture of the glamorous side of it, that you are seeing these photos, you know, of
the photos are real
parked up on the beach.
You know, like, I don't think people are, you know, faking, photoshopping photos. Like, the majority of people aren't.
Let's put it this way. If you're in middle America, you're not going to really find the beautiful beach like Florida, right? Granted, you're not going to be able to park on most beaches in Florida unless it's a specific beach, right? Or a specific RV parking lot, right? Or parking spot, I should say. So some of them you're going to actually have to pay for. Others are, you know, taking the picture for the beauty of it, so that way they can put it up on social media, you know. But then you have the opposite person who's like, I spent the weekend in an RV and here's the 13 things I hated. Like, you absolutely have no idea or no correct opinion on the lifestyle because you haven't even lived it. Right?
But I think there is a market in selling that beautiful. Like, we know a couple people who never traveled in a van, never lived in a van, and would just go out on weekends and stuff and take photos. And then their whole Instagram account looks like they live in a van full time.
Yeah.
You're like, well, okay, if that's what you want to do, then that's cool. But, you know, that's actually not a realistic depiction. Frankie and I try to, you know, give all sides of it. You know, we share the good and the bad, you know, on YouTube and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. But also there is a bias. Like, if we're having a really shitty day, I don't want to film. I don't want to pick up the camera. You know, it's just like, you're not like, oh, like, you know, we've kind of gotten a little bit more when we're like, okay, this will be good for YouTube. You know, like, we have to film these bad things, even if we don't want to. But I'm not going to take a picture and put it on Instagram. You know what I mean?
It's not even just the fact that it would be good for YouTube. It's good for everybody to see that it's a normal lifestyle too, in this general sense.
And like, bad things happen.
Yeah, correct.
Things break down.
We want people to have a realistic sense of what any lifestyle is. So especially van life, because that's the particular one that we live, right? But I will say that there is definitely more good than bad. There's definitely more upside than there is downside, in my opinion, at least. We do find ourselves parked in very nice, beautiful places a lot of the time. You know, the Walmart parking lots, the Cracker Barrels, the, you know, random parks that aren't as pretty are in between spots a lot of the time to get to the more beautiful spots. We are people that like to be in those beautiful spots and off grid as much as possible.
But we also have to be on the internet too, because that's part of our job and our work. And a lot of those beautiful off grid spots don't have any service.
And I think what we're having too is we're having a mixture of the city van lifer compared to the rural van lifer, and the city van lifer saying, oh, it's not really like that, because they're parked on a city street in a not so picture perfect place, right? And then they're complaining about the picture perfect place, and then you have the opposite happen. So it's just like kind of two different viewpoints.
Well, I think there's even another viewpoint in terms of like the real OGs of van life who've like been in it for 10 plus years, maybe more out of necessity than like choice, being like, oh, why is everybody talking about, these van life things? Why are you sharing your spots? Why are you, taking pictures like this? Why are you sharing this? Like, we don't need any more people in van life. It's already hard enough to find places to park. And I can understand that, but I also feel like those people, like, we travel a lot. We're literally like in and out of states. We're moving, we're crossing the country. We're like about to drop into Mexico. So it's like, we're never really in one place very long. Whereas I feel like some of the more OG people are in the same place for a very long time because gas is so expensive and because, traveling far distances is, or maybe they just like that spot and like, this is their spot and they just want to be there. But then when other people find out about it, now it's not their super secret private spot anymore,
And I think with all that passionate talk, what's to be, really taken away from it is van life is whatever you really want to make it. And that goes for every lifestyle, right? What you want it to be, it can become that. So it's about your perspective. It's about the way you want to live it. You're going to have struggles, it's part of the life. So be ready for that. But yeah, as long as you come at it with like a good positive, glass half full type of perspective rather than half empty, you're going to have a much better time and you're going to find those glorious things in it.
Well said. Well said. You're out there in these mountains, obviously in winter or in cold climates. And I actually saw that you've already made a video about sort of winter living in van life, but what would be some of the tips that you've learned along the way to sort of prepare your van and yourselves for the cold climates?
So basically, you definitely want to have a well-insulated van. Let's start off with that. So not only do you want to be well-insulated, but you also want to have covers for any type of windows that you have inside your van. That will keep any cold air from coming through the windows and kind of reject it, as well as keep your space warmer when you're running your heater. You're definitely going to want to have a heat source, if not two. So we have one gas-fired heater for the van that is hooked up directly to our fuel tank. So as long as we have fuel in our van, we have heat in our van. You're going to want to have a DC to DC charger. So that way, whenever you drive your van, you're charging your battery bank, because in the wintertime, you have lack of sun if you're in the mountains. So you're going to want to have a way to charge your battery bank. If you have lithium ion batteries and you're worried about it getting too cold outside, or if you have your batteries outside, you got to make sure that you have some type of heat source on your batteries, because lithium ion does not like the cold. Once it hits freezing temperatures, it's actually kind of dangerous to charge those batteries if they're outside and they're not inside a heated space. So for us, our battery is in a heated space, but when it gets as low as like negative 15 degrees outside, the batteries actually kind of feel that from the floor. So you have to make sure that you have some type of heat pad or heating source that's just on a switch. So if it gets super cold outside, you could still charge your battery bank without having any issues. The next thing would be just, having that second heat source. Because if that first heat source that you have is a gas-fired heater, gets like a carbon buildup or something like that, you're going to need a second source. So we have a little Mr. Buddy heater that you could just hook a propane tank up to in case of emergency. We haven't had to use it yet, but it is great to have it.
Well, the one night we needed it, we didn't own it yet.
Correct.
And then we learned our lesson that, when your heater fails, which is another thing that people don't think about, is that if you're going to be at altitude, your heater is going to work differently because the air is thinner. So our heater is only rated for like 5,000 feet.
And you can do an altitude adjustment, but it doesn't make a crazy difference. There's still the opportunity. It does make a difference, but there's still the opportunity of combustion buildup of carbon. So you have to run that heater at a much higher temperature so it could burn off some of that carbon so you don't get as much of a buildup. And every year you will have to clean that source. You have to take apart the whole heater, clean it out with some carbo cleaner, put it back together, and put it back in.
Not a fun job.
No, it's very tedious, and you have to tinker a little bit.
And you're going to get dirty.
Yeah, you're going to get real dirty.
So I'm curious, that first time you were moving to the van, you guys both came from very stable sounding kind of careers and sort of lives at that time. What was kind of going through your mind when you were actually moving into that first van and going on this adventure?
100%. We were nervous. We'd spent the whole year beforehand saving up a lot of money. And so we knew that we had a cushion. We had kind of budgeted that we each needed to save $1,000 per month that we wanted to travel. We were planning on traveling for a year, so that's $12,000 each. So we had that saved. The van was already paid for. The build was already paid for. So we had pretty low expenses at that time, which was great. But as we were driving away from Brooklyn, New York, we'd just moved out of our apartment. We'd given notice to our jobs. Like, that was it, like, we're gone. It was kind of surreal feeling. Like, I think, I thought maybe there would be some kind of like jubilation or like, woo, like we're doing it. But really we were both kind of like dumbfounded. Like, did we really just quit our jobs and blow up our lives? And did we really just like do that? Like, now what?
I could remember that first night really well. We were driving and we're headed up to like one of the first mountains of the 71 mountain challenge that we were doing. And we're driving on the road and we're like, where are we going to stay tonight? And this is before we knew about like iOverlander and all these other apps. So we pull up into a hotel parking lot and park in the back area, put everything up, and I'm like going to watch like a Netflix movie, and Alex is like, shut off your phone, don't talk, be quiet. And she's like freaking out fully, and I'm like, babe, like, we'll be all right. Like, but like obviously I'm like shutting everything off because I wanted to feel good, and we just like lay quietly in the van that night.
I think it took like at least 3 months for us to really feel, or for me probably, Frank was like, it's fine. But like, I just always felt like, people were watching us or noticing us or seeing our van or like cared that we were parked on that street or, and I was worried about getting the knock and, all that kind of stuff. So it took maybe like a month plus to realize that we weren't just on vacation from work.
Yeah.
Because I think that you're so used to and conditioned from working a decade in corporate life that like, oh yeah, I'm on a 1 or 2 week vacation and then I'm going to go back to work.
So we're buying all the food out. We're doing everything like out.
It was like more of a vacation. Whereas, now we've figured out that there's a very big difference between being on vacation and full-time travel. Because yeah, we do eat out sometimes, but like most of our meals are made in the van. It's more of like a house living, just that happens to move around a lot. But yeah, I think there was that kind of adjustment period of like, we felt more like we were on vacation, and then we got the bill at the end of the month and we were like, oh, we're not on vacation. We need to not be on vacation. Like, yeah. We need to figure out how to like make this sustainable, or else our, savings isn't going to last the whole year that we're planning on traveling.
I think another thing that happens that a lot of people don't talk about is that first 3 months you start to realize all the things that you need and what you don't need. So at the same time you start going through like this purge where you're just like letting go of things. And for us, we were like letting go of things and just giving them away to random strangers on the road. So like we walked into a store and we grabbed like a sandwich when we were in Vermont, when we were headed to the next mountain. And Alex had all these essential oils that were like, we don't need these. And so I walked inside and I asked the girl, like, hey, would you like essential oils? And she's like, oh, that's in that aisle over there. No, I'm like, no, I'm asking you if you would like some.
Like,
and
here's
I'll
a
give
whole
them to you
bag
for free.
full.
And she's like, oh my God, yes. Like, thank you so much. You know, and it's just wild, like, how many things we've just given away for free because we don't need them. And
well, because we were moving from an apartment into the van, right? So we purged a ton of stuff. In the year that we were kind of leading up to moving into the van, we sold a lot of stuff. We, you know, sold a lot of clothes, electronics, like random stuff we knew wasn't going to fit in the van. We got rid of all of our furniture. Like, we don't have a storage locker anywhere. Like, literally everything that we own.
Right here.
Minus, like, a box at Frank's brother's house and a box at my parents' house is in the van, you know? So we were purging and purging and purging. But then when we were moving into the van, we still had so much stuff. So, like, every cupboard was completely full. Every nook was, like, stuffed.
Yep.
And then within, like, a week or two of being on the road, it was like, screw this thing. It's in my way. I don't need it. And then you're just getting rid of it. Because it's, like, it's more of a hassle to own it than it is to, like, you know, you have nowhere to put it.
Yeah.
Maybe walk me through. I mean, this is something I've personally dealt with. And, you know, I think any person that has really sort of immersed themselves into van life or some sort of minimalist type of lifestyle. But like you said, you have to go through that purging, that downsizing. What was going through, like, how did that make you guys feel? Was there some things you wanted to hold on to that you didn't? And then was there some feelings of sort of, you know, like personally, I can talk about, you know, feelings of just kind of a little bit more freedom, getting rid of some things that I didn't need. And also just like looking through all this old shit and being like, oh, why am I keeping this around? And just like actually like moving on from stuff I don't need.
Yeah, for me in the beginning, I was the one who was justifying the means for each and every single thing. It was very hard for me to tear away from cords. Like,
he was like, we need
like
all of
adapters,
these electrical cords.
And like,
and I was like, no, we absolutely don't.
It'd be silly, stupid things like that we don't need at all. And I'm like, oh, we could use this. She's like, when is the last time you used that?
Like, you didn't even know you owned this.
Yeah.
And now it's so important to you that we have to bring it into the van. Like, I was very much, I'm like throwing shit out. I'm donating stuff. I'm purging. I'm like, whatever. I had like a small box of like trinkets or like things from my grandma or like things that were like important or like breakable that I knew that I wanted to like keep if we ever, you know, moved into a house again or something. So I, you know, kind of put a box aside for that. But otherwise it was like, if we don't need it while we're living on the road, we're getting rid of it. And if we find out that we need it while we're on the road, we'll just buy it somewhere.
And the feeling aspect of it, maybe for the first 10 minutes, I was like, why did I do that? And then after that, it was more freeing. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, wow, I just let go of this stuff and I don't really need it. And then after the next couple months, I was like, what other stuff can we get rid of? And I became more extreme in it than even Alex was. And I think now, today, I'm probably more so like, let's just let that go. Like, let's let it go, you know? And where now Alex, like clothing wise, she might be like, well, I kind of want that, right? I think we've kind of came to this like crossroad where I'm a little bit more like, I don't need it.
Well, it depends on the thing.
Yeah.
So he's got his whole like tools set and like weird random ratchets and nuts and screws and bolts. And I'm like, you don't need all that. He's like, well, you never know. We might need this bolt like sometime somewhere. And I'm like, no, we probably won't. And whenever we do need stuff, we end up going to Home Depot or whatever and buying the exact thing we need. So it's not like, anyways, we have kind of flipped. But like for him now, he's more like, I'm happy to purge all of the house stuff and I'm happy to purge all of his tool stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, but we do live with like, you know, we live with what we need. Right?
We do have minimal tools. We do have minimal stuff. Like just like we wear, you know, only a certain amount of clothes, you know, we only use a certain amount of tools. So it's like, there's only so much that we actually need. You know, before, and if we do really truly need something, we could go to the store and buy it. You
know, you guys have come a long way from parking in a hotel parking lot and being scared to talk. In the last couple of years of van life, maybe tell me where do you park now? Where do you find places to park and stay?
Well, so I am now like the mayor of every parking lot in the world. I talk to literally everybody. I have no shame in my game. I just enjoy meeting new people, and I enjoy talking about the lifestyle and about our travels and learning about other people. So we park in parking lots now. Normally would be like Walmart, Cracker Barrel, but those are like the in-between spots. That's when we're on a mission to go to a new state or a new national forest or park. It's very much the in-between spots, but we find a lot of places on iOverlander. Most national forests have like BLM land or areas where you could park for free, and we try to find those spots. We don't really like to pay to park places because we don't make a ton of money right now. And also we find that the places that you pay to park are not nearly as nice as the national forests and the more scenic areas. We like to look out our windows and out our doors and see trees and mountains and lakes, and there's a lot of them in the United States. There's a lot of places that you could park that look like this, unless you're city dwelling. Then like city dwelling is a little bit different. We do park on streets in areas that allow you to. There are definitely cities that are very okay with it, and then there's other cities that are not okay with it at all. So knowing what those areas are when you're going there, looking up like what their laws are, is fairly important. When the laws don't allow it, that's when we wind up in the Walmart parking lot or the Cracker Barrel or the outdoors stores that allow you to park in their parking lots for a night or two. But we do not ever set up shop there. We don't throw out a mat. We don't make it our place. We don't blare music. We try to be super respectful. We don't throw trash around. It's very important that we have those spots as like, ways to get to the next spot. You don't want to get those places shut down. And I think a lot of people, I don't want to like label anybody, but it does seem like the bigger like RVs tend to kind of set up shop because that's kind of a necessary thing for them, where in the van you don't have to set up shop so much. Like you're inside the vehicle and then you move on. But you wind up seeing these people kind of like lay out a mat, and then you walk into the store, because we always try to like purchase something, a coffee, whatever it is. At least then we're, if we're going to use the facility, we've at least bought something. We've done our part. But we've walked into some of these places and they're like, man, our GM is going to definitely go talk to that person to kick them out. And, these are the things that we want to avoid. So if you do park in a place, ask for permission,
be friendly
with the people. I know some people are introverts and not extroverts, but it's just part of the game. Like if you want to live this lifestyle, it should be part of, being a part of the lifestyle. You should be open to talking to people, and just making sure it's okay that you're in that particular spot.
I couldn't agree more. It's definitely important to be, like you said, just sort of respectful of the people around you and the places. If you see garbage, try to clean it up and leave the place nicer than you left it if possible. And especially with the rise of popularity of this, more and more places are getting shut down, and it's pretty much because of incidences of disrespect. So yeah, we can all do our part as much as possible. I'm curious to hear from if you have any, like, what would be some of your most memorable experiences that you've had in the van so far?
There's been a lot of them. That's what this lifestyle is kind of about. It's all about making memories and living your life to the fullest. And I would have to say when we explored Alaska was incredible. It's a place that I've always wanted to go, and it's very boondocker friendly, very nomadic friendly.
We met so many nice people there too. I feel like a lot of our best memories are, when we, in Alaska, we were parked up on a riverbed and a guy drove by on his 4-wheeler and happened to kick up a conversation. And then the next, you know, we were asking, or Frank asked, you know, where would be a good place to go for a hike around here? And the guy was like, well, I don't know much about hiking, but I've got 2 extra 4-wheelers and we could go out riding tomorrow. And we were like, hell yeah.
And the dude took us all the way up like to 4,000 feet in the tundra, climbing crazy rocks and stuff. It was Alex's first experience on an ATV.
Almost died like 3 times, but it's all fine. You know, we're here to tell the story.
Yeah. It was just an awesome adventure. And we've had many of those things. We met a guy, Jim, while we were out there that was like an older gentleman. And he had this crazy, beautiful homestead that like looked at the glacier as well as these mountain peaks in the background and a river running through it.
He took us for a whole tour of his property and like all of it. He was ready for the zombie apocalypse, that guy.
Yeah.
Like literally everything that you could possibly imagine that you would need to like survive. He's like, we could just blow the bridge up and we'll be good for the rest of my life. And I'm like, holy smokes. Yeah. Like, good for you.
But the way we met them, actually, that bridge, they were rebuilding it, like taking up all the old wood that was on it and laying down new wood. And I went out there and just offered a hand and helped them out, you know, because that's what it's about. It's about helping your neighbor. Yeah, they might not be my neighbor right now, but they were my neighbor when we were parked there. And it's all about, you know, helping one another. And I think that's what this community is about, as well as what we should be in the world in general. We should just be there to try to help each other, give a hand when we can.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great way to be. You mentioned it earlier that you had a toilet set up in your first van. I'm curious what your kind of toilet and shower systems are like. These are questions that are so frequent in the van life community from people that are interested in it. It's one that I have to ask. What do you do for showers? What do you do for toilet?
So in our first van, we had this idea that we were going to have a lot of guests coming to visit us. Nobody has come to stay in our van, despite lots of people saying that they would. But so anyways, we had built our front bench area to kind of slide out to become like a double wide so that people could sleep on it. That literally never got used a single time. But the way that it was built, it would slide out, but then when it was closed, it would also lift up to reveal the toilet underneath. But unfortunately, it was never kind of built properly or set up properly. So it was almost impossible to use it as a toilet. Like it was there, but it wasn't functional.
Let's just say like the urine diverter and the bucket that was like a composting bucket basically, where we would just put dirt in it, were separated, so it wasn't easy to use either or both at the same time. And then this van, we realized that we had to have it more like stationary together.
Did we even have a shower in our last van?
We had a shower in
our last van,
yes.
So in the first van, we built a shower that pulled out as a drawer.
And it was basically a washer sink, like
one of those big plastic white sinks that you would have in like a laundry room.
Or a slop sink, if you would.
We reused that as a drawer that would pull out that you could stand in. And then the water would come from the sink. But unfortunately, in the first van, our water heater system, it was like an electric tankless, and we never had enough electricity to actually make hot water. Yeah. So every time we would go to flip it on, the inverter would trip. And so we never had hot water in the first van, even though we thought that we were set up for it.
The problem is we would only be able to run that hot water heater with the inverter flipped, and if we ever ran anything else with it, it would trip it.
Like even like charging your cell phone, you know what I mean? Like you literally couldn't do anything and have hot water. So we just never got used. So anyways, we had the setup. We used the shower a couple of times.
The hardest part about the shower was when we would take a shower in it, the tub would start to fill up a little bit because it didn't have an airway or a vent, so it could just flow out freely. So we would have to lift the shower bucket after so it could then drain out.
But it's funny because I feel like we got that idea from a couple that we watched on YouTube, and they were like, oh, this is the bee's knees. So we were like, okay, let's do that. And then it just like didn't really work. Yeah. But so in this van, the front bench area is the shower and toilet. So you lift up the lid, and then the one side is a fixed shower basin. So it's like a plastic shower base with a drain that goes right out to the ground. Because, you know, just like showering outdoors, which is we have an indoor-outdoor hot water situation. So we could shower outside, we could shower inside. The water just drains right to the ground. For us, that seemed like the best option. We've used biodegradable soaps. And we try to, you know, only shower in places that are like outside of the city. If we're in the city, we'll use a gym or, you know, public pool or
a truck stop.
Truck stop showers. Love truck stop showers. So anyways, so that functions much better. And then we still have the bucket toilet set up because we didn't feel like it was worth it to spend $1,000 on a toilet. So we have a bucket with a built-in urine diverter from Johnny Compost. It's this guy on Etsy who 3D prints them. And so the urine diverter fits perfectly into a 5-gallon bucket. And then that pipes directly out of the van. And so again, we only use that in situations where we're like in the forest or where we would like pee, you know, if you would like walk 5 steps away from your van and like pee on a bush, it's the same thing, but inside. And then we also have like a bucket system for like what do you call it? Like a honey pot. So you have your, you know, you would just like pee in a bucket and then dump it where you can. If you can't, just let it flow out. And then the composting toilet is just a bucket. And then we have a space next to it that's full of composting dirt. So we usually just buy that from like a Lowe's or a Home Depot. And we try to get the one that's high in peat moss. And coconut core. And then you just go number 2 in the back, cover it with the dirt. And there's like, as long as it's fully covered, there's no smell or anything that comes from it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of people think like, oh, it's going to stink. I mean, it doesn't smell at all as long as it's covered. The only time it will smell at all is when you're going. And then once you cover it, that's it. But you turn on a fan, you know, you spray some stuff, light a candle, whatever it is that you're going to do to cover up the smell a little bit while you're going. We could, you know, put a curtain up if we wanted to, you know, make it to where you feel more comfortable just in there by yourself type of thing. But yeah, it's worked out extremely well for us this time around. We do put a bag inside the bucket, so that way it's easy to just close the bag up and throw it out if we need to. Or we could dig a hole deep enough to, you know, dump the waste into the hole and then cover it up, you know, put a rock on top. That way it could just naturally decompose and become a fertilizer.
You mentioned you had savings for around a year when you first got into van life. You know, you've been doing this longer than that. So how have you been able to sustain that? And how do you make money now while living in the van?
Yeah, so basically what happened is when we had that initial savings, we figured we would use that for the year. But as we were traveling, we were making YouTube videos about the lifestyle and our travels. And so what started to happen is people started enjoying the channel and the YouTube revenue started to pick up. So we were actually starting to replenish, you know, our savings instead of just using only our savings. When the pandemic happened, we decided to, instead of having 2 different channels, to combine the channel and make one channel, which is now F&A Van Life on YouTube. And once we branded ourselves and made ourselves a van life channel, we really started to expand and grow, as well as, you know, the pandemic kind of helped us in that way, because a lot of people were looking into this lifestyle now, and we were one of a few channels at the time that were, you know, making videos about it. So we wound up going from about 3,000 subscribers to like 10,000 in a very short period of time. And now we're at about 24, almost 25,000 subscribers just on YouTube. At that point, I think we were making like $300 and then $400, then $700, and then it made its way all the way up to about $2,000 in a single month for us.
But then we learned that YouTube is very volatile.
Yes.
So we were like, oh, great, we're going to be making this much money forever. And like, oh, it's going to be amazing.
That didn't happen.
And then what we also learned is that the last quarter of the year is when most advertisers spend all of their money. So our CPMs were super high through November and December. And then January hit, and it was like, oh, you only made $500. And you're like,
Oof.
whoa. Like, we thought it was going to be like, you know, up, 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 up. And then we learned that it's more like up, down, side, up, down, over, back, up. So, you know, from that experience, we, you know, learned in our second year that we really needed to diversify. So we, you know, couldn't just count on YouTube to be able to, you know, sustain, because one month you might have a great month and then the next month not so much. So we've learned, you know, to repurpose our content for other websites. You know, we've doubled down on like brand deals and things like that. We have, you know, a couple different ways that we're bringing in income now, and that makes it sustainable. Whereas if we were just counting on the YouTube to, you know, fund our lifestyle, it would be very tight.
Yeah, and when it comes to like brand deals and sponsorships, we really only work with stuff that allows us to live this lifestyle and other people live this lifestyle. Because once again, we are minimal, so we will not take on anything that doesn't have to deal with this lifestyle and won't improve this lifestyle for us.
Makes a lot of sense. So what's next for you then in this adventure you're on?
We actually are about to head to Hawaii for like a family vacation, but then when we get back from Hawaii, we'll probably do a little bit of snowboarding in February, and then by the end of February, we'll enter ourselves into Baja, Mexico, and then ship the van over to mainland Mexico and continue south through Central America, and hopefully ship the van to South America and continue on all the way down to Chile, Argentina, where we meet all the way down at that most southern point. Yeah, and just exploring, meeting new cultures. I think that's the next step for us, is getting ourselves out of feeling so comfortable. And because when you are not so comfortable is when you have so much growth, right? When you put yourself in situations where you feel less comfortable, you learn a lot more. So we think that that next aspect of our lives would be traveling through Mexico, Central America, South America, learn a lot more about the world itself in general, you know, build our own picture of the world rather than relying on a news source to tell us what the world's like, you know, because that's what the life is about, is exploring, learning more about all different types of things, as well as seeing the world for what it is.
Very exciting. That sounds like awesome adventure. Like I'm stuck out here on my homestead right now, and I can't wait to get back on the road. I plan to in a couple months, but it sounds amazing, and I'm very envious right now. But anyway, where can people follow you? Shout out your YouTube and any other socials or websites that you guys have.
So we are FNA VanLife. So that's Frankie and Alex, the letter F, the letter N, the letter A, VanLife. Also, like, fucking awesome. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but I have, I think, at least twice. So sorry about that. But yeah, so FNA VanLife, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, literally anywhere. Even
our website is fnavanlife.com. Everything is FNA across all platforms. We are fully branded when it comes to that.
And we're also like, we're happy to be a wealth of information for people if they have questions, if they are, you know, getting into the lifestyle. Like, our DM box is always open, and we get questions all the time about random stuff.
And a lot of people are surprised that we answer them back. Like, I mean, that's what we do. So we want to help you. So we will answer you back. Even if it takes us like a couple days or a week, we normally answer back within that day. But just depending on if we have service or don't have service, it might take us a little bit longer. So just be a little patient with us.
Thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was really great talking to you both, Alex and Frankie. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for us. We appreciate you having us on, and we look forward to hearing more of your podcast as well.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to support this show directly, you can do so on Patreon, where we have some exclusive content, some additional information. And also, there's another way you can support it, just by simply sharing it with your friends and social media and anyone that you think might be interested in this podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks everyone who supports our sponsors, because they support us. Appreciate you all. Every single Thursday, there is a new episode. So subscribe, check us out on your favorite audio podcast platform, and we'll see you next Thursday.